You're watching Moms Matter. I'm your host, Shirini Adigar, and in the studio today for the first ever seen on camera. I'm very excited today because I actually have my daughter in the studio with me today. Eden Yadigar is a student at Columbia University, majoring in Middle East Studies and Jewish Studies, and she is also the president of Students Supporting Israel, and she is here on break, and we're really lucky to have the warrior live in person in the studio. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
It's an honor to watch what you are doing at Columbia University as a student activist. And we've been watching since October 7th, really in fear as parents, as community members, to wonder how you as students are really navigating this hostile environment. And I'm wondering, Eden, is it really as bad as it looks, what we're seeing on the news?
I think the answer is twofold, because largely it is hostile and tense the way that the media portrays it to be. But because of that kind of hostile environment, Jewish students have come together and been more united and more empowered than ever before in American history on college campuses. And so I think we're witnessing a really unique time, and despite the challenges, it feels so empowering to be a student surrounded by like-hearted and like-minded Jewish students that are finally standing up and wearing their Judaism with pride on their sleeves in public. But I mean, yes, it has been a challenge. I think that we've realized that anti-Semitism is everywhere, from online, on social media, to the halls of our libraries, to our classrooms, on the streets of Morningside Heights, which is the neighborhood where Columbia is. We see ripped down and vandalized hostage posters on our campus and off of it. We've seen friends of ours bravely serving in the Israel Defense Forces receive death threats. And these are students who have gone back because they've either been called from the reserves to go back to Israel and have actually had to pause their studies, or have taken time off to go serve in the Israel Defense Forces. And mind you, these are 19, 20, and 21-year-old students largely. And so for a campus like Columbia that's upwards of 20% Jewish and has the largest IDF veteran community out of any American college, it's really disheartening, and it feels very isolating to see this kind of demeanor and language be used to demonize our peers and to demonize us largely. Something that I think my peers and a lot of my professors have tried to do very strategically is to separate Judaism and Zionism. And to be a Zionist is to support and believe in Jewish self-determination in the indigenous homeland of Israel. To be a Jew isn't necessarily to uphold that ideology. However, we know that the majority of world Jewry and of American Jewry does identify as Zionist. And so when you say, you know, we accept Jews in these spaces and in our classrooms and in our clubs and in our communities, but we don't accept Zionists, is essentially to say we don't accept Jews. More than 90 clubs on my campus at Columbia have signed on to Columbia University Apartheid Divest, which essentially is a coalition of student groups that is boycotting Israeli products and divesting from Israeli companies, and saying, we are calling to shut down the dual degree program between Columbia and Tel Aviv University, and we're calling for an end to the new global center in Tel Aviv that Columbia is opening. And they're singling out Israel in a way in which they don't single out any other nation on earth. And they're isolating the majority of Jewish students on our campus by saying, we're going to go ahead and join this coalition. And I guess, well, if you were a member of this club before, like the Reproductive Justice Collective or the Barnard College radio station, guess what? You're not really welcome here as a Zionist. Oh, but just as a Jew, that's fine. But if you believe that Israel has a right to exist, you don't have a right to exist as a member of this club. And so it has been really isolating in all facets of life. It's permeated campus life and campus culture, and we feel like we really can't avoid it.
I mean, I'm so sorry. I mean, you're 18, 19, 20-year-old students who go to university to learn and to create friendships and to flourish. And it just seems that you're not invited into these spaces, that intersectionality does not apply to you. And we've seen that the leadership at these elitist schools is really flawed, right? We watched the congressional hearings. We saw the resignation of the Harvard and Penn presidents. Do you blame the leadership? Do you think now that we're seeing these resignations and some light, do you think things will change?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that now, because this systemic and cultural issue of anti-Semitism in American universities is being brought to light in a way that I don't think we've seen before, that we will have some real tangible change. I don't necessarily think that the leadership is solely responsible for the anti-Semitism that we're experiencing, but they do have an obligation to kind of put a stop to it. And largely they're not. And so we saw, the resignation of President McGill from Penn and President Gay from Harvard. And while those are necessary and important steps to send a clear message that anti-Semitism is not tolerated in those universities, it's just the first step. And those two individuals failed at their jobs, and also they weren't the sole kind of perpetrators of anti-Semitism. You could argue that it's a much greater issue than them, and it is. And so while it's important to send a clear message that anti-Semitism is not tolerated in American universities, if we're not seeing steps to change that, such as education, such as incorporation of the Jewish community and of anti-Semitism into mandatory DEI trainings, then at the end of the day, it's all kind of worth nothing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I love what you say to incorporate it into DEI, because a lot of people now are pushing to get rid of DEI altogether. But you're saying, no, let's have a seat at the table.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to the conversation about DEI, there are also proponents that are saying we need to have anti-Semitism education, but I think it's a step simpler than that. We need to educate people about what Jews are and what it means to be a Jew, because Jews aren't just a religion. Jews have a language, we have a history, we have a historical and ethnic tie to a land. Jews are indigenous to the land of Judea. That's why we're called Jews, essentially. And people don't know that because we don't teach it in our schools and in our DEI curriculum. So I think a lot of the hate comes from ignorance. And I think a lot of the hate isn't necessarily always intended to be hate. I see a lot of well-meaning peers of mine marching with pro-Palestinian, or what they believe to be pro-Palestinian marches, that are really just singling out Israel, demonizing Israel, and holding Israel to an unrealistic standard that no other country in the world is held to. And it's not necessarily because they in their heart and soul hate Jewish people. I refuse to believe that. I think that as a society, we're much better than that. But when we don't educate people about who Jews are and where we come from, it's hard to hold people accountable to understand what that means, and to understand that Zionism is actually an indigenous liberation movement. And the modern state of Israel is one of the only successful examples of modern decolonialism that we've really seen. And I think if people were more aware of that, then we wouldn't be having these issues of cultural anti-Semitism in universities to the same degree. That's not to say it would go away, but I think it would be better.
So education is a huge part of the solution to all of this. And you are going to return to school shortly after your winter break. And it's going to be heated. It's not settled down. We're on day 101 now. Hostages are still being held. People are calling for a ceasefire. What are you hoping will happen as a student and as president of Students Supporting Israel when you return to campus?
I am begging for people to listen, to open their minds and to open their hearts and their ears and just listen, because I've been ostracized and I've been isolated and I've been silenced simply because I'm a Zionist. That's it. And I know that my peers have felt the same way, and I speak in the first person because I have had those experiences, but I receive dozens of texts and calls and in-person messages a day saying, I'm not welcome in this club anymore. My professor said this. My roommate won't speak to me, because I support the right of the Jewish people to self-determine in their indigenous homeland. At the end of the day, it's as simple as that. And I think if people were to really listen and not come in with some, narrative that they're already holding to be true and that they're refusing to question, they would realize what we're actually standing for and what we're fighting for. Because being a pro-Palestinian doesn't mean you're anti-Israel, just like being pro-Israel doesn't mean you're anti-Palestinian. We realize as Zionists largely that Jewish and Palestinian self-determination and coexistence and peace are tied, are intrinsically linked and come hand in hand. And so as Zionists, we're not telling the Palestinian people to go anywhere. We're fighting for our own rights and for peace and for coexistence and self-determination. And I think that so many of my peers are so shocked when I say that oftentimes they won't even listen, and they'll say, oh, they'll dismiss it as propaganda, or they'll say, oh, well, you're just trying to further your own agenda. But it's genuinely what we're fighting for post-October 7th and pre-October 7th. We want peace, we want coexistence, we want to acknowledge each other's humanity. I'm sitting and I'm asking my peers, look at me and see me as a human being. Don't call me the Zionist entity. Don't call me a puppet of the Israeli government. I'm a 20-year-old American college student that believes that Israel is my homeland, just as Palestine is the homeland of Palestinians. I'm not asking anyone to go anywhere. Please don't ask me to go anywhere.
It's beautiful, Eden. I really hope that you will be able to have those conversations. That's why you're at a university like Columbia, to have those conversations, right?
Absolutely.
You are the brightest students in the country coming together to hopefully find solutions for peace. And I hope that you'll be able to have those dialogues. And we're here to support you. And we're also proud of you and your peers and how you're standing strong in unity. To be proud of who you are, it really makes us all very proud to watch what's happening. And thank you for taking the time to come in today and to speak with us.
Thank you. It was an honor.
You saw it right here on Moms Matter, and we hope to see you all next time.